towards inbound tourism. We carry almost 50% of the inbound international tourists that come to New Zealand each year. These visitors feed into a tourism industry which, when combined with our domestic tourism industry, is worth close to $20 billion a year to the New Zealand economy. So we're a very significant, and probably the largest single company in that tourism sector in the economy. But as everyone would have a sense, the challenges of operating a viable airline are significant. We generate around $4.8 billion of revenue per annum, and we have about $4.7 billion of cost. We operate 100 aircraft flying around 3,000 flights per week. We carry 13 million passengers a year. We have about 11,000 employees. We consume approximately 9 million barrels of jet fuel each year. 4 years ago, the cost of that fuel was $480 million. 4 months ago, the cost was about $2 billion. At today's jet fuel price and exchange rate, the cost is about $1.3 billion. It's anyone's guess what the price will be in another 4 months' time. So you can imagine the interesting discussions we have around the board table about the planning process. When you make $150 or $200 million a year and you've got these kind of wild gyrations in terms of one input variable in your business, to that degree it gets pretty tough. Notwithstanding the scale of our business as I've just described it, we're a small airline. So we're about the 36th largest airline in the world, surrounded by much larger, very well funded competitors like Qantas and Emirates and Singapore Airlines and Cathay Pacific and Air China and United Airlines, ready to pounce on any weakness or any opportunity they see. So there is very little margin for error in our business. And size does matter, and it's tough out there when you're the small guy. So with that in mind, it's a fair question to ask, to say, is there a place for Air New Zealand amongst these big behemoths, these big airlines, a number of whom have ambition for global domination? And actually, should New Zealanders even care whether Air New Zealand survives or not? Well, clearly, being in this job, I believe that there is a role for Air New Zealand. Actually been quite a significant shareholder now. I believe quite genuinely that the loss of a national carrier with a network centred on New Zealand would actually have quite a devastating impact on the New Zealand economy. And let me just give you an insight into that. All airlines, whether they're low-cost carriers or full-service airlines, operate a network business. They build hubs and then they try to build dominance or strong market presence around those hubs. So even here in New Zealand, if you take a Pacific Blue, they hub their operation out of Christchurch, or Jetstar across the Tasman at the moment does the same. We hub our international business out of Auckland. We hub our domestic business effectively out of Wellington. The reason airlines operate in that way is that you build that presence because you tend to get business from people. People want to fly with the airline that provides the best network reach to meet their needs, because they want to earn the loyalty points with the same airline. So you want to fly on the airline that's most likely to fly where you want to go. You want to fly with the airline that gives you the best rewards, that you belong to the lounge program of, that you're familiar with their processes and systems and how everything operates. So people tend to develop loyalty to an airline, and you'll get better loyalty if you have stronger depth of network out of a particular city or location. So, as I mentioned, we operate a network that's centred on New Zealand with our international hub in Auckland, our domestic hub in Wellington. We aim to be the market share leader on all routes we fly to, from and within New Zealand. And in essence, with one exception, if we tend to look at route groups rather than individual routes, we are the market share leader, and that one exception at the moment is Auckland, Hong Kong. And every other route we fly, we are the market share leader. But at any point in time, up to 1/3 of the international routes we operate are unprofitable. In fact, today that number's a little higher than 1/3. Those routes are unprofitable. The reason we fly them is because the customers that fly on that unprofitable route then connect to another route which is profitable. So if we look at the value of the customer and their end-to-end journey, then they are profitable to us, even though one component of that network may be unprofitable. If you stop flying that unprofitable leg, then you start to starve the profitable leg of the feed of those customers through onto that sector, and that's the complexity of operating a network business. To attract offshore visitors to New Zealand and to fly on Air New Zealand, we spend about $120 million a year in sales and marketing programs in offshore markets to market this destination. That's almost double what Tourism New Zealand spends marketing New Zealand on behalf of the New Zealand government. The other airlines that fly, international airlines that fly into New Zealand, spend negligible amounts to market destination New Zealand because that's not in their interests to do that. Their strategic and economic incentive is to draw passengers to their network and through their hubs, because where they make money is drawing passengers into their hub and then to other points on their network. Emirates' reason for being, just by way of one example, is to support Dubai's strategy of becoming a global tourism, media, financial services, cargo and transport hub, not to convince people in the UK or the US why they should fly to New Zealand. It would be foolish of us to think that that is their motive and their reason for being. And that applies the same to Qantas or Singapore Airlines or Cathay Pacific or Air China or United Airlines. Just as our interests, we spend a fraction of the amount of money we spend in those offshore markets to bring people to New Zealand, we spend a fraction of that amount of money promoting offshore destinations in our home market. So let's just for a moment take Air New Zealand out of the picture and envisage what happens. Firstly, the 1/3 of the routes that we fly in any average year that are unprofitable are far less likely to be flown at all. And if they are flown, it'll be at much higher prices and probably reduced capacity to improve the profitability of those routes. Because those routes won't be core to anyone else's network, they won't get the flow-on benefit that we get, say, by the domestic leg of the journey if someone has been unprofitable on that international leg. The resources invested to market destination New Zealand would dwindle as foreign airlines look to New Zealand as a source of traffic into their networks and become less interested in trying to drive traffic to a remote destination on the edge of the world. That problem is further exacerbated by what we term in our industry the taper effect. The mind boggles, doesn't it? The taper effect refers to the diminishing profitability achieved when flying longer routes. The problem you have in our business is that customers are not prepared to pay twice as much to go twice as far. And unfortunately it costs more than twice as much to fly twice as far. And the simple reason for that, if you think about it, when that flight takes off from Auckland to go to LA, the first litre of fuel that we burn to get the aircraft off the ground costs us $1. The last litre of fuel we burn as we're coming into land in LA costs us $1.50 because we burnt another half litre of fuel to carry it all the way to LA to use it at that last point in the flight. And that's just one example. There are many things on the flight that become more and more expensive the longer you keep the aircraft in the air. So the longer the routes you